Welcome Intro to Art students to our first major project. It's based on things that you are very familiar with, which are brand logos, some of which are from clothing companies, apps, restaurants that you may frequent. You're going to choose one that appeals to you, and you want to choose one that is very popular, not one that few people know about. You want to choose one that we see on a daily basis if possible, because that's going to help you in people understanding your design later. So what we're creating is a logo remix, and basically you're taking an existing logo, you're transforming it into not a new version of the logo, but you're just transforming it almost like it's just pieces or components in an original artwork that you're going to make. So it is going to start with a collage and then eventually turn into an illustration, but these are a couple examples of some finished pieces. The one on the left is mine, and the one on the right is a former student. Look at them both and hopefully you can tell what brands were used for inspiration. The one on the left, my own, was based on the Starbucks logo. I tried to include as many clues as possible to help the viewer understand that, the color scheme, also keeping a lot of the symbolism, the stars, the character's face, the squiggles, but I did make some major changes, and it's no longer the Starbucks logo, but now it's a narrative, it's a scene, it tells a story, it has characters. That's one approach you can take, is to create a scene, to tell a story, to use those pieces to form other objects or characters. On the right is an example of a student work, and they took a little bit of a different approach, and there is a little bit of a narrative there, but most of it is just an abstraction. They broke down and segmented the original Buffalo Wild Wings logo. You can still see enough evidence that you know what it was based on. And they did make some color changes to other parts of it, especially in the perimeter. But it is an original piece. It is not necessarily telling a story. It's just meant to be pure design. So you have two approaches you can choose from. One is to create a scene or a narrative. The other one is to create an abstraction. But they're both based on an original logo that people can identify. Let's look at a couple more. The one on the left is not a clothing brand or an app or even a restaurant. It's actually based on the logo for a comic book character. So you can even think beyond brand names of goods that you can buy. So this is for Captain America. We can see a lot of evidence of the shield and the way it was broken down and dissected and kind of rearranged. And I really like how this artist chose to not just put their piece in the center of the composition, but really cropped and used the outer perimeter of the work as well. And this was marker, Sharpie marker, Prismacolor marker, and charcoal that was used in this piece. On the right, there wasn't a whole lot subtracted from the design, but there was a lot added. This is based on the newer of the two Adidas logos, the parallel bars. And they added the bottom part and did some tilting and changing and maneuvering to create something that was based on the Titanic. So we see the Adidas logo, or at least part of it, on the top, and then these additions on the bottom to make it look like a submerged part of a ship, which I think was very clever. So how does this begin? Your first part of the assignment is you're going to create a couple PowerPoint slides that are strictly just your logo that you chose repeated over and over again in different sizes. It may even be a good idea to have a notion of what you actually want to do before you begin, so you know how big you should make these, because what we're going to do is print these slides and you're going to cut pieces of them out, and then you're going to collage them later to create the beginning of your illustration. So for mine, I just have 2 PowerPoint slides. If you need more than 2, that's okay if you think you're going to need a lot of pieces to work with. But you can tell I use different sizes, and some of them I even let them go off the slide because I really wanted a large component to use. And keep in mind, you're going to be using scissors and glue. You're going to be cutting these pieces out later to create an initial collage. Okay, so let's take a look at what some of my other students have done in the past, and not just the logo that I was working on. Now this one was a little complex, but this was an advanced artist that chose to do this, because there is some shading involved and a lot of color mixing to get these kinds of tones. But this artist chose to use Mr. Clean as their inspiration. And so you can see this is just one of their 2 or 3 slides that they printed off to begin the piece. But they used parts of the face that they wanted to zoom in on, they thought they might use. But what they ended up really coming down to for their final design, I don't have a picture of the final piece, but this slide will help you understand, is they decided that they wanted to do one of those Russian dolls where it was like a smaller doll within a larger one within a larger one. So this was the first slide. They kind of played with that concept and cropped some of these things. And on the other slides that they had some larger arms that they kind of just made this one look like it was in this one and then another one. So I thought that was very clever. This was based on something very simple, and maybe the logo you choose is simple. I actually think it's probably a bad idea to use a logo with text. If you're going to, you might want to take the text out just because it might be a little too complicated. We didn't have that problem with this Nike logo because of its simplicity. But what this artist did is they took these parts of the swish and used the sharp part for teeth of a tiger, and then used the end part with the curve to create claws. And so I thought that was very clever. They printed this out several times, cut out the pieces, and rearranged them. This was an example of a student I had to talk to a little bit about how to set up their slide maybe a little better, okay? Because this was the original slide before I had a discussion with them, and they basically just copied and pasted the same logo and over again, and it wasn't very effective. So what I ended up telling them is like, hey, maybe we should make a couple PowerPoint slides with different sizes of these, or maybe we should even, if you right click, you can crop and maybe take ones and just use the portion of the design. You don't have to use the whole thing. And then you can copy and paste that several times and maybe use that. So if you Control C, Control V is paste, and you can kind of do that a couple times and rearrange that in a little better formation, maybe make some of them even a little larger. And then when they print their slide, they have some more options. Okay, obviously we want to fix these overlaps, but the point of printing out a couple PowerPoint slides with these logos repeated is so that you have collage material to work with. Now, I was very excited about this idea when a student brought it to me at first, but this is an example of a logo that may be too complicated to use in this project. And the reason why is because they really ran into trouble when they tried to cut it out, okay? And so like imagine with a pair of scissors or even X-Acto knife cutting around each one of those fingers or the laces on the shoes. And so it proved to, as much as this is an iconic logo, the Air Jordan logo, and it's a beautiful logo, it just didn't work for this assignment because of the complexity of every single detail had to be perfect. Okay, so it didn't end up working out. So that brings us back to, this was how we started the piece. If we were doing a Starbucks logo, that's what I used as an example, but you're going to pick your own, of course. You would fill up a PowerPoint slide, so you can use PowerPoint on Microsoft 365, which you can access from the school's website, or you can use the PowerPoint app on your computer, and you're going to do 2 or 3 slides. If you're able to print them at home, that's great, or we can try to print them in the classroom, or you can just simply email me a PDF version of your PowerPoint slides and I can print them for you. Okay, so once you've printed all those off, okay, the next step is to start slicing and dicing and using scissors or X-Acto knives and glue sticks or Elmer's glue and start gluing them down on just a simple piece of printer paper. So you can see some rearrangements. I didn't even glue these down at this stage. I was still playing with them, maybe tilting the head in one direction or another, and then making my adjustments before I glued it down. Okay, very important that you do eventually glue it down though. This one on the right was a student that used the Pepsi logo, rearranged them into a Pepsi can. Okay, there are some pluses and minuses with this design. I'm not going to get into that, but it was clever the way that they rearranged it. Once you've created your actual physical collage with all the pieces that you printed, we now have to figure out a way to get that collage to turn into a drawing, to turn into an illustration, okay? For this piece, you are going to be permitted to do some tracing, okay, because I want your final piece to basically be exactly the same as your collage, at least the outlines, okay? So this was a student that did the Fendi logo, and they had, like, you can't see the whole thing, but they had a spiral of the Fendi logo getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it finally spiraled into the middle. And you can see the illustration of that on the left, and they're identical. Well, how did they do that? Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. If you're in the classroom with me, we have light boards, and that's just simply an illuminated surface that you would put the drawing paper on top of the collage, and you could make that tracing. If you're at home, you can do this on a bright window, okay? Or You can use the flashlight app on a iPad or a phone, and you can also use that to illuminate underneath the drawing and make your tracing that way. Okay, so you have a couple different versions, or if on your laptop your screen is big enough, you could use that as well. Okay, so in any case, you're going to trace on a piece of 9 by 12 drawing paper, or a little smaller in the case of the people that I see in person, so we can use it for something else later. But basically, anywhere between 8.5 by 11 or 9 by 12 piece of drawing paper should work to trace your design. Okay, and so once you've traced your design, you can see I made a couple cheat marks for myself on this one. I kind of put little X's where I needed to fill in with color, just so that I would remember, because my design was pretty complicated. And I did intentionally leave a border. That's something you might want to consider too. And I started to add color and Sharpie to this. Okay, now the color can take the form of, really, if you're at home, if you're a remote student, any art material would be fine. If you're with me in class, we're probably going to use Prismacolor color pencils or markers. Okay, but any other markers or color pencils you have would certainly be fine. Okay, so these are a couple student examples that are at that beginning stage. This one was just traced over on the light board, and we're trying to clean it up a little bit and use some Sharpie. When the color was added, it looked a lot better, but at this stage, it was just kind of mapping it out. And this was one that's a little farther along, where they used the Pringles logo to do some rearranging. This is towards the end, okay, of a couple students' work, okay, and this is one that was based on the Girl Scout logo, which was very clever the way they made it symmetrical, and you could tell they didn't use the whole logo. They sliced and diced it, like I said, and reinvented it. The one on the right is based on a couple versions of the Mercedes logo, and so this one on the left, like I said, is more of like a well thought out, not quite a narrative, but it could be, and it's a design that is less random. The one on the right is more of a random abstraction, and either one that you feel comfortable with doing will be fine for this assignment. Okay, so at the end, again, it's colored. It has probably some hard outlines that you did in Sharpie. If you're with me in class, we'll probably throw a nice crisp border on it and sign it, and of course you'll submit it on Teams like everything else. So I just wanted to give you a heads up as to this is how this next assignment is going to go. The first stage that you want to start thinking about now, though, is finding your logo images. They should be high quality on a search engine like Google or Bing, and copy and pasting those onto at least 2 PowerPoint slides, different sizes. If you're able to print it at home, fantastic, or at school. If not, you can send it to me as a PDF, and then I would be happy to print it for you. Okay, good luck.